Welcome to the kitchen. Not my kitchen. This is Nana's kitchen, meaning it is my boyfriend's grandmother's kitchen. We are kind of here temporarily while we figure things out, especially with COVID happening. So this is where I'll be cooking, although this recipe doesn't require any cooking. The main thing you need tool-wise for this recipe is a blender. So if you don't have a blender, this probably won't work for you. Blender or a food processor are best. You can do this recipe with chickpea croutons on top, but I just kind of skip that step because I find the salad delicious as is. So let's go through the ingredients. So for the actual salad dressing, you're gonna want half a cup of raw whole cashews, soaked overnight or 2 to 3 hours, depending on how much time you have. Sometimes I even soak them for like 1 hour and it's fine. And then you need water, which I will get from the tap. You need extra virgin olive oil, a lemon for lemon juice, Dijon mustard. Then you will also be needing garlic powder, as well as garlic itself. You need Worcestershire sauce, so I use the gluten-free and vegan type. This is the Wizards, so it's organic, gluten-free and vegan, so I use that brand. You also need capers. So these are the weirdest things. I've never actually had capers until I made this recipe. And yeah, so I got the berry type, that's jarred, but you can also get kind of the leafy consistency of the capers. So they kind of look like this. They actually look a lot like green olives. So again, you're gonna be blending this in a blender, so you don't really need to think about eating the capers themselves because they're just gonna be blended up in the dressing. And finally, all that's needed is obviously the kale and then some sea salt. Some people massaged the kale. I'm not really about that, but I'm sure that would help with the texture of the kale, but I just find it good as is, so. The final thing that is needed for the Parmesan recipe to add on top of it, if you want vegan Parmesan, you can use just regular Parm, but I'm leaning vegan. So you will need nutritional yeast, which kind of gives it that cheesy taste. You'll need either raw cashews, or you can use raw pepitas, which are pumpkin seeds, and then sea salt and garlic. That's it for the parm, which you will do separately. So we're gonna get started. First things first, wash your hands. Not only is it COVID, it's also gross to come from outside, whether it be on the subway or in your car, or from touching your dog to just handling someone's food or your own food. So let's wash up. That's better. Okay, we're ready to get started. I like to be really organized when I'm cooking just because it makes the process quicker to clean up. So I have all of the things that I'll be needing. I have a bowl to put the actual kale salad in, I have my blender, I have my measuring cup, and then I also have kind of a discard bowl for when I'm cutting the kale or any kind of garlic peelings will all go into this bowl so I can just get rid of it at the end of the recipe. We're gonna start with the Parmesan cheese just because it involves dry ingredients, and we're gonna be using the blender twice, once to make the parm and once to make the dressing. So I want to do the dry parm, empty it, and then do the wet ingredients. Again, I'm gonna be linking this recipe down below, and you're gonna get a link to my Trello board. If you haven't heard of Trello, some workplaces use it. Kind of like a Pinterest board, but it's for work efficiency and work productivity. It's just a very aesthetically pleasing way to organize my recipes. So that's where I'm gonna have the card with this specific recipe in it so you can follow along. So we're gonna need half a cup of raw cashews to start off. So then I'm gonna put it into the blender. Next, we're gonna need 1 clove of garlic. So 1 clove, you don't need to worry about crushing it. You can just throw it into the blender. We're just going to blend the cashews and the garlic until it is smoothish. It looks pretty smooth now, and I can add the rest of the ingredients, so the salt and the nutritional yeast. We want 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast next, and 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. So then you just pulse it until it's a bit smoother again. So this is the consistency of the vegan parm once it's done. It's a bit crumbly, and it also has a few little chunks, and if you want to break them up, you can. but it's quite salty and good. You can always add more salt afterwards and just blend it a bit more if you don't find it's flavorful enough. So we're just gonna set this aside now. We are going to now get going with the dressing. So using the same blender, again, doesn't matter if there's some leftover parm in there, it's all gonna get blended eventually. You're just gonna add literally all of the ingredients that I mentioned earlier, and that'll be listed on my Trello board, to the blender, everything except salt. I'm gonna strain and add the cashews. I'm gonna add half a cup of soaked whole raw cashews, a quarter cup of water, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, a half a tablespoon of Dijon mustard. Next, for the capers, if you have them in berry form like me, I usually add like 3 or 4, so I'll de-stem them first. I'll take them out, they kind of look like this. So I'm gonna do 3 today. Take the stems off and throw it in. Half a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, okay. And then we need a tablespoon of lemon juice. So I'm just gonna cut up the lemon that I have. Take it, I'm gonna squeeze. Now you have all the ingredients except the salt. You can blend it until it's smooth and then add the salt afterwards. It is definitely creamy and a bit thick. Okay, so I have the dressing. I leave it in the blender just so I can scoop it onto the kale. Now all you're doing is taking some kale. I have, I think, 3 bunches here. You're basically de-stemming them and putting the kale into a bowl where you're gonna mix it all together. De-stemming and cutting up the kale, and this is kind of the situation right now. So I have enough, I'd say, for 2 people. I think Matt will probably enjoy having some of this after I'm done with it. So all I'm gonna do now is I'm going to add the dressing that we made and then top it with some of the vegan parm, and then that's basically it. So this is it so far. Now we just need to add the finishing touch, which is the parm. You can just sprinkle it, you can kind of eyeball it and then just mix it and see how it tastes and then add more. I kind of go on the heavy side with it, but it's totally up to you. Stunning. She's very simple, she healthy. Oh man, I wish you could taste this. So I really appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you enjoyed the recipe. I will definitely get better at this as time goes on, at talking to the camera, at figuring out how to shoot things and not be cutting so much. I think my next video will either be another recipe or it might be an introduction to my Trello board and how I organize kind of my digital recipe book. So I will see you next time, and thanks for tuning in. Made me think of the late nights, late drives, back to BREONNA.